All right, what I'm doing here, you can see some ghost lines here because I just did this whole thing and then realized that I hadn't pushed record. Anyways, that's the fun of doing this. So I'm going to just redo what I just did. What I am looking at now as I draw my back line is I'm looking at the height to length of this back rectangle. And, you know, I'm going to rotate off of that vanishing point. You know, that seems a little too tall to me. That seems, you know, pretty close to it, but I don't want it to be the same line as my front line because that would be confusing, right? I don't want it to be that. So I'm just going to look at that. And if I'm going to err at all, I would err on the side of it being too tall, okay? Too short, just take my advice on it. Like, too tall is better than too short on this because you're going to be like raising that volume up and it just looks better. Okay, so I've decided that's my rectangle and it's the least foreshortened of the two. So I'm going off of that back. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to draw my whole rectangle now based on that. And then I'm going to take a look at it. All right. You know, I might erase some of these, get them out of the way so I can look at the whole thing. What I want to do is I want to look at this bottom rectangle and look at it based on the width to length of that rectangle. Can I buy this rectangle as that one in perspective? I look at it, it seems a little bit too long to me, right? Too long for how wide it is. So I want to adjust that. I have two choices. One is to chop some of it off because it's too long, right? That's pretty reasonable, except if I chop that off, I'm also chopping off this rectangle, which I decided I like the looks of. So really what I'm talking about when I say that something's too long is that it's too long for how wide it is. So I could make this a little bit wider and have the same effect, right? I can fix that way. So I'm going to stretch these out just a little bit, right? Or extend them, these lines. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is all pretty similar to what we did last time. But I want us to spend a little bit more time with the proportion this time, because if we can figure that out on the small scale here, it's going to be it's going to make our job a little easier as we go on. Okay? Which is not to say that we can't make adjustments later. It's just easier to make them earlier than it is later. Stitch in time saves 9, right? Okay, so I'm looking at this. I mean, that's, you know, way too. So I wanted to widen this out some. So I am doing just that. Now in doing that, I'm afraid that I'm going to get that to be the same problem that I had before, where the top line might just end up being the same as the back line. I don't want it to do that. And in fact, it's not doing it. It's just barely missing. That's an aesthetic choice that probably happens all the time in real life, where you've got two lines, a front line and a back line, that are overlapping, becoming the same line. So just because things happen all the time in real life doesn't mean I want them to happen in my drawing. In fact, I don't want it to happen in my drawing, especially if I'm trying to teach a class on perspective, where that would be really confusing for a lot of people. So you can see that this line is barely missing that line. Fair enough? All right, I'm going to clean up my mess. Get rid of the old rectangle. That was too thin. Get rid of all these, whatever, dog legs or whatever we're going to call them. Dog legs, poor little dog. Okay. All right. Now I got a good box with some fairly extreme perspective to draw my big box from. Okay. All right. Get that far. Give me a perceptual study. Give me a perspective study. See you tomorrow.